Hello ladies and gents, and it's the Brunel Museum, but you're standing on one of the architectural wonders of its age. This, and just here, this is the shaft of the first ever navigable underwater tunnel, the Thames Tunnel. We'll learn far more about its history as we go into the shaft, but I'll walk you around and get you some exterior views. Hungerford Bridge 1845 over the River Tame. Another one of Brunel's engineering marvels. The museum will be closing any moment now, but if we're a little bit naughty, we go through here. I'll show you the exterior. This is the boiler house. This building was originally used as a boiler house during the construction of Mark Isambard Brunel's Thames Tunnel between 1825 and 1843. It has since had many alterations and changes of use. It was restored in 1979. Mark Brunel's engine house, 1842. And in there, you can get a much better view of this mural from here, but in there is where it gets very interesting. That's the first shaft that was sunk to create the world's first underwater navigable tunnel. You'll now join me inside the museum, so off we go. And we shall start where it all began, with the tunnel shaft, and then we'll go into the other part of the museum afterwards, which is exhibits and such like. Tunnel shaft this way. They sank this shaft down using iron rings and very great weight, and traction engines and steam engines, well not steam, traction engines, steam engines and things like that. The grand entrance hall, opened by His Royal Highness the Earl of Wessex. Oh, he's done a bit, the old Earl of Wessex, 10th of November 2016. Now, years ago, you had to come in through a hatch and scaffolding. Now they have stairs. I'll pause this and then I'll restart when this starts. Now we're going down into the original shaft that they sank down, and we'll watch the story of the creation of the tunnel, shall we?
Welcome to the Brunel Museum, where we celebrate the Thames Tunnel. It was the first tunnel built under a navigable river anywhere in the world. This grand project was engineer Mark Brunel's idea, and his son Isambard became chief engineer at the age of only 19. The building of the Thames Tunnel revolutionised engineering and continues to affect how we build tunnels today. But why create a tunnel under the Thames? It is hard to imagine now, but in 1825 this was the busiest river in the world, with 13,000 boats passing by every day. With such a packed river, it was said at the time you could cross by stepping from one ship to the other. The height of the tall-masted ships and bridges were out, so Mark Brunel decided to go underground, building a tunnel stretching from here on the south of the river at Rotherhithe to the north of the river at Wapping. To start tunneling, the first thing that was needed was a tunnel shaft. So they built this structure above ground and sank it into the earth like a cookie cutter. And when they had trouble getting it to sink, they added more bricks on top to weigh the structure down. And this is the great thing about engineering at the time. They had to constantly adapt to make this grand scheme work. Miners were recruited to start tunneling, but they needed to be protected from the earth caving in on them. A great shield was built, and it inched forwards painstakingly slowly as the miners dug out the earth and built the brick walls that lined the tunnel. As well as Mark's son Isambard, his daughter Sophia was interested in engineering too, and described as Brunel in petticoats. We can wonder what else she might have achieved if she had not lived Victorian times, where women were barred from any form of higher education. It's amazing that we can visit the shaft today and imagine what it was like for the miners who dug the tunnel all those years ago. Digging the tunnel was a dangerous and tiring job, so the miners could only work in 2-hour shifts. They were showered with Thames water from the beginning to the end of their shift. That wouldn't be pleasant today, but in 1825 the Thames was the biggest open sewer in the world. In 1827, disaster struck. Water came in through the roof, flooding the tunnel. Thankfully no one was killed, but digging had to stop. To block the hole, they dumped huge quantities of bagged clay into the river. But it wasn't long before the river burst in again. This time, 6 men drowned. Isambard, who was in the tunnel at the time, was carried unconscious by a wave of water into the shaft. One of the workers managed to pull him out through this small window, and although he was rescued, it is said he refused to ever return to the site. Finally, in 1843, the Thames Tunnel was complete. It was meant to take 3 years, but ended up taking 18 years to finish. Instead of a practical route across the river, it became a vibrant tourist attraction. On its opening day, there were 50,000 visitors. By the end of the 3rd month, there were 1 million visitors. People came from all over the world to marvel at the novelty of walking under a river. In 1852, it became a spectacular underwater fairground, with sword swallowers, fire eaters, magicians, and tightrope walkers performing. One section of the tunnel was decked out as a ballroom, and a steam-powered musical organ played dance tunes under the Thames. But eventually, the numbers fell, and the tunnel became a dangerous place, frequented by pickpockets and thieves. The tunnel was sold to the railways in the late 1850s, and you can see the black marks of salt walls the Victorian steam trains used to pass underneath. The shaft is now blocked off from the tunnel, and you can still sometimes hear the trains running beneath us, transporting people and goods just as was intended all those years ago. This place offers an amazing opportunity to travel through history and see one of the most exciting engineering projects in the world.
If you see that mark that goes all the way around the wall like that, that's from the original staircases. Where people got down into the tunnel. You can see it much better there. You can see it much better there. And the soot. This is capped off now, but below us is the Thames Tunnel through which trains run daily.
Welcome to the Brunel Museum, where we celebrate the Thames Tunnel. It was the first tunnel built under a navigable river anywhere in the world. This grand project was engineer Brunel's idea, and his son Isambard became chief engineer at the age of only 19. The building of the Thames Tunnel revolutionised engineering and continues to affect how we build tunnels today. But why create a tunnel under the Thames? It is hard to imagine now, but in 1825 this was the busiest river in the world, with 13,000 boats passing by every day. With such a packed river, it was said at the time you could cross by stepping from one ship to the other. The height of the tall-masted ships meant bridges were out, so Mark Brunel decided to go underground, building a tunnel stretching from here on the south of the river at Rotherhithe to the north of the river at Wapping. To start tunneling, the first thing that was needed was a tunnel shaft. So they built this structure above ground and sank it into the earth like a cookie cutter. And when they had trouble getting it to sink, they added more bricks on top to weigh the structure down. And this is the great thing about engineering at the time. They had to constantly adapt to make this grand scheme work. Miners were recruited to start tunneling, but they needed to be protected from the earth caving in on them. A great shield was built, and it inched forwards painstakingly slowly as the miners dug out the earth and built the brick walls that line the tunnel. As well as Mark's son Isambard, his daughter Sophia was interested in engineering too, and described as Brunel in petticoats. We can wonder what else she might have achieved if she had not lived in Victorian times, where women were barred from any form of higher education. It's amazing that we can visit the shaft today and imagine what it was like for the miners who dug the tunnel all those years ago. Digging the tunnel was a dangerous and tiring job, so the miners could only work in 2-hour shifts. They were showered with Thames water from the beginning to the end of their shift. That wouldn't be pleasant today, but in 1825 the Thames was the biggest open sewer in the world. In 1827, disaster struck. Water came in through the roof, flooding the tunnel. Thankfully, no one was killed, but digging had to stop. To block the hole, they dumped huge quantities of bad clay into the river. But it wasn't long before the river bursted again. This time, 6 men drowned. Isambard, who was in the tunnel at the time, was carried unconscious by a wave of water into the shaft. One of the workers managed to pull him out through this small window, and although he was rescued, it is said he refused to ever return to the site. Finally, in 1853, the Thames Tunnel was complete. It was meant to take 3 years, but ended up taking 18 years to finish. Instead of a practical route across the river, it became a vibrant tourist attraction. On its opening day, there were 50,000 visitors. By the end of the 3rd month, there were 1 million visitors. People came from all over the world to marvel at the novelty of walking under a river. In 1852, it became a spectacular underwater fairground, with sword swallowers, fire eaters, magicians, and tightrope walkers performing. One section of the tunnel was decked out as a ballroom, and a steam-powered musical organ played dance tunes under the Thames. But eventually, the numbers fell, and the tunnel became a dangerous place, frequented by pickpockets and thieves. The tunnel was sold to the railways in the late 1850s, and you can see the black marks of soot on the walls from the Victorian steam trains that used to pass underneath. transporting people and goods just as was intended all those years ago. This place offers an amazing opportunity to travel through history and see one of the most exciting engineering projects in the world.
And that's where you'll join me, back up the top in the engine house. But before I go, along the stairs here are the names of all the people that funded the renovations that give this staircase just some of them anyway.
Welcome to the Brunel Museum, where we celebrate the Thames Tunnel. It was the first tunnel built under a navigable river anywhere in the world. This grand project was engineer Mark Brunel's idea, and his son Isambard became chief engineer at the age of only 19. The building of the Thames Tunnel revolutionised engineering and continues to affect how we build tunnels today. But why create a tunnel under the Thames? It is hard to imagine now that in 1825 it was the busiest river in the world, with thousands and thousands of boats passing by every day. With such a packed river, it was said at the time it could cross by stepping from one ship to the other. The height of the tall-masted ships and bridges were out, so Mark Brunel decided to go underground, building a tunnel stretching from here on the south of the river at Rotherhithe to the north of the river at Wapping. To start tunneling, the first thing that was needed was a tunnel shaft. So they built this structure above ground and sank into the earth as they couldn't help it. And when they had trouble getting it to sink, they added more bricks on top to weigh the structure down. And this is the great thing about
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that and found it interesting. It's the old ventilation still. This is still ventilation for the railway today.
A great shield was built, and it didn't forward to things taken slowly as the line of
The grand entrance hall. Well, that was very interesting, wasn't it? There's a little garden area. It's the old engine house. Just don't forget, the tunnel would have had to have been pumped out of the water. Even when built, they weren't completely watertight. So these engine houses are what did the job. Modern day pumps and equipment come into their own right in that. Now you're going to join me inside here in a sec. Brunel's engine house. The tunnel shaft and pumping house for Mark Brunel's tunnel was constructed between 1825 and 1843. This was the first thoroughfare under a navigable river in the world. So, we are standing on top of and have been down into an engineering marvel of its day. Join me inside the engine house. And there is the sun.
I guess then in that case maybe it would be good like when you discuss which like what you would like us to do.
There is the father, Mark Brunel. You can buy copies of these. glass because it covers some other things. There's the tunnel. You don't really get to see much of it at all when you go through it on the train. So this exhibition highlights it ideally. Busy river in the early 19th century, the River Thames and Rotherhithe was a mass of shipping, small boats and people. The world's trade flowed through London, bringing huge wealth but also creating traffic jams on the water and on the bridges. I have had a curiosity to count the ships and have found above 2,000 sail of all sorts, not reckoning barges, lighters and pleasure boats. Daniel Defoe, 1726. The tunnel in the Thames, London's river in the 19th century, was as congested as the city's roads are today. At any time, there were over 3,000 large merchant ships and thousands of small boats on the water. The Thames was London's economic lifeline, but also a major barrier to traffic. The city urgently needed more crossing places. Crowded bridges. In the 1820s, Rotherhithe's newest river crossing was London Bridge. It was busy, expensive to use, and over 2 miles away, merchants and citizens needed another way to cross the river. Watermen. The Thames watermen, with their distinctive uniforms and shoulder badges, made a living carrying people and goods across the river by boat. Although they provided an essential service, they annoyed people by the way they touted for trade. They were meant to be pretty rowdy, apparently. If you cheeked one of them, you could end up in the river or being thumped. The Thames Informer. Brunel was not the first to try a tunnel under the Thames, but previous attempts were thwarted by quicksand and floods. Mark Brunel's various inventions included a bootmaking machine, a circular saws, early sewing machine, and a device for copying out letters. The River Thames was also London's sewer, and the water was a breeding ground for diseases. On hot days, the smell was overpowering. Merchants complained that transporting goods across the River Thames by bridge or by riverboat cost almost as much as bringing them from America. Mark Brunel was imprisoned for debt in 1821, but the British government agreed to pay his creditors to make sure Britain did not lose such a valuable man. Brunel was a perfectionist. When his tunnel was completed, he complained, "I could start again. If I could start again, I would build it better." Join me for part 2. Welcome back. Besides, how can you bridge the river so low down as this? Why would you stop all the vessels and spoil the London harbour? For you cannot raise a bridge high enough for the large sailing vessels to pass in under. Max Schlesinger, 1853. They would have to wait a few years for Tower Bridge to come along for that. Underwater bridge. Mark Brunel's plan was simple. If you could not put a bridge over the river, then why not put a tunnel under it? But building the world's first underwater tunnel tested his determination and engineering skills to the limits. Mark Brunel announced his plans. He was already famous in Britain for his amazing inventions. Sadly, he was a better engineer than a businessman. He was often in financial difficulties and even went bankrupt. The tunnel and Mark Brunel. London needed a crossing downriver that would not interfere with the shipping of the docks. The solution came in 1825 from an ambitious French-American engineer called Marc Brunel. Although he was one of the most brilliant inventors and engineers of his time, today's achievements are overshadowed by his even more famous son, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Technical skills. At the time, Britain led the world in machine engineering. This image shows the innovative blocking machine that Marc Brunel designed for the Royal Navy. The key to the building of the tunnel lay in the designing specialist machines to work underground. Dangerous obsessions. When the project began in 1825, Brunel was famous and quite wealthy. His grim determination to complete the underwater Thames Tunnel cost him his health, his fortune, and very nearly the life of his son. As well, the project took 18 years to complete. The informer. After the flood of 1828, the tunnel was bricked up and work stopped for 7 years while the company tried to raise money to complete. At top speed, in idle conditions, the tunnel advanced about 7 feet per week. In difficult ground, progress dropped to less than a foot per month. After Isambard Kingdom Brunel resigned, he never worked with his father again, although they remained close. While R.K. Brunel was recovering from his injuries, he designed his famous suspension bridge over the Avon Gorge near Bristol. And this one's sinking the shaft. To make the shaft, Brunel built a huge iron-bound brick cylinder above ground. The miners dug out the earth from the inside, the 1,000-ton cylinder, causing it to sink slowly into the ground under its own weight. The tunnel and its engineering. Soft, soggy earth collapses easily, making tunnelling impossible. Marc Brunel needed a way to hold back the Thames mud and water while his men built strong, waterproof walls for the shaft and for the tunnel. His brilliant invention made it possible. Driving the tunnel. For the tunnel, Brunel invented his huge iron tunnel shield, divided into 38 cells. In each cell, the tunnel face was propped up by thick boards, braced against the shield with strong iron poles. The back of the shield rested against the newly completed brickwork of the tunnel. The great excavation was accomplished by means of a powerful apparatus termed a shield, consisting of 12 great frames. Slow progress. In spite of the ingenious shield, the progress of the underwater tunnel was agonizingly slow. The miners had to work through different layers of clay, gravel, quicksand, and sinking river mud in their route from one side to the other. There's the man himself, Marc Brunel, and there's the shield. Brunel's tunnelling shield was cutting edge in the 1820s. Industrial machinery, a complex series of boards, screws, jacks, runners supported the soft earth of the workface and prevented collapse. Engineers planned and organised the building of the tunnel, using their knowledge, materials and physics to solve the problem along the way. And here's the shaft and how they began its work. They sank it down, bit by bit, down into the tunnel. Engine men knew how to operate and fix steam engines. Their work stopped the tunnel from flooding. Boilermen looked after the fires under the boiler to make sure the engine always had enough steam. Labourers above ground fetched supplies and lowered them down the shaft and carried away the earth and mud from the tunnel. Foremen. The men on each shift were led by experienced and trusted workers who gave them tasks and solved minor problems. Labourers below ground carried building materials to the workface, brought back the mud and earth to the bottom of the shaft. When necessary, they used hand pumps to help keep the tunnel free from water.
Right. Do you want to look at different ones? Do you want to listen to something?
Bricklayers. These men worked behind the shield to build the tunnel and the arches with the bricks and cement. Their skillful work has lasted to this day. And here they are, look. Here's the tunnel shield, it's very clever. Would later go on to develop to the great head shield and things like that, and to the modern tunnel boring equipment that we have today. Miners, the 36 miners on each shift, dug out the soft earth and moved the shield forward. If disaster struck, they were the first from. They were furthest from safety. This watercolour shows the tunnel shaft buildings in 1825. One wall of the nearby house has been painted with a full-scale diagram of Brunel's tunnelling shield to impress visitors before they descend into the tunnel to view it themselves. Commemorative medals. It was custom in the 19th century to celebrate great achievements by producing a set of special medals. Most of the medals in this case mark the completion of the tunnel and are decorated with a variety of miniature designs and information about the project. Two medals mark the launch of the SS Great Britain in 1843 and the death of Isambard Kingdom Brunel in 1859. Mark Isambard Brunel, 1839. Let you got his signature there. There's hyacinth. Deviations for Mr. L. Dubinson to call upon you and request you to give him to give him £5 on my own account. Oh dear, listen, you did have debt troubles. Discover the stinky story of London's Thames and our smelly trail. When you see a nose, you can smell things. Ships carrying cargo from across the world in Dockseas, London. Oh, that smells really strongly of spices. If you lift that up and you come here, oh, it smells really strong of cloves. Isambard Kingdom Brunel, that smells nice. Isambard Kingdom Brunel resigned as president engineer after a bad accident in 1828, trapped underground by a sudden flood. Isambard's injured and unconscious body was hauled from the flooded shaft outside this museum by his assistant, Beamish. I may be said almost to have built the tunnel, having been active resident engineer. Isambard Kingdom Brunel, 1827. The younger engineer Isambard Brunel was raised by his father to be an engineer. His education included several years at the prestigious Henri Quarto College in Paris, an apprenticeship to the world-famous watchmaker Abraham Louis Breguet. Blimey. Tunnelling in Isambard Kingdom Brunel. When the tunnel's resident engineer resigned in 1825 after only a few months of digging, the company appointed a 19-year-old Isambard Kingdom Brunel in his place. The ambitious young man threw himself into the work with energy and initiative. When the tunnelling was difficult or dangerous, he often slept in the shaft in order to be on hand. He's known to have drunk in the Mayflower pub as well. Learning the trade, young Isambard Brunel saw the project as a great opportunity and gave it all his energy. He spent whole days and nights under the river, checking work, solving problems, and supervising progress. His leadership so impressed the miners that they awarded him a ceremonial pick and shovel as a sign of their respect. He was once to have said, "Never set a man to do a job of work you cannot or will not do yourself, sir." Frontier engineering, working in the... That's what I read about him, by the way. Frontier engineering, working in the tunnel, appealed to the young Brunel's love of adventure. Just hours after the first major flood in 1827, he was lowered to the riverbed in a diving bell to find and plug the source of the leak. Blimey. Stereoscopic peep show. Take a look through the holes. Before photography, peep shows like this were a popular way to remember places you had visited, because figures inside are at different distances from your eye. You get an impression of depth and perspective. That's very clever. So you could buy, these were like the souvenirs that you could buy back in the day. A dual layer peep show. Take a look through the holes. This unusual peep show has 2 levels. The upper holes show the traffic on the river, while the lower holes give the view of the Thames Tunnel. The long perspective along the tunnel was a popular subject for artists in London. Brilliant. Courage. I saw that each man with his eyes on Isambard Brunel stood firmly prepared to execute the order he should receive. Visitor to the tunnel in 1827. The tunnel and the men who built it. Skilled workers in the tunnel were the miners and bricklayers who were well paid for their work. At the bottom of the scale were the unskilled labourers, often Irish, who received very low wages. Although we know the names of miners, no records of the labourers have survived. Pay. The miners were paid about £1 a week, a respectable wage for the time. The bricklayers were paid by the number of bricks they used. A well-trained man could lay over 1,000 bricks a day. Brunel complained that this piece rate system encouraged speed rather than good workmanship. Sickness, inflammation of the eyes, sickness, debility, and eruptions of the skin were the most prevalent symptoms. Medical report on the tunnel workers. Well, you can imagine it, can't you, with the Thames flooding into it was an open sewer. Conditions. The work was hard and the tunnel was wet, noisy and dangerous place. The unhealthy atmosphere in the tunnel caused serious illness for all the men who worked there. When the air was really bad, the men could only work for a few hours a day. Despite this, the men and the managers worked side by side and trusted each other. The Thames Informer. Doctors tried to retrieve recently drowned bodies by applying hot bricks. By applying hot bricks to their hands and feet or giving them brandy. So they didn't have CPR in those days. That was the way they did it. The company gave 2 workers beer to keep up their strength. The tunnel's first victim fell down the shaft after an evening of drinking. All the digging was done by hand, as there were no power tools. The Thames Tunnel flooded 5 times between 1825 and 1843. Workforce. The shield with its 12 vertical frames helped limit the dangers by supporting the workforce with boards. Each of the 36 miners worked one cell of the shield, scooping out earth and mud from behind the boards as water and marsh gas rushed in. Yuck. Fire and flood. While number 2 frame was blowing out torrents of water, number 12 frame was vomiting flames of fire, which burned with a roaring noise. Beamish Assistant Engineer Memoirs. The tunnel's dangerous disasters. The men in the tunnel were always in danger from floods, explosions, roof collapse and poison gas. Mark Brunel joked grimly that they had to fight all 4 elements: water, fire, earth and air. Behind the workface, a team of hundreds of bricklayers, pumpmen, labourers, engineers and supervisors worked to build the tunnel strong enough to support the crushing weight of the earth and water above. Floods. Water gushing all the time. But a serious flood filled the tunnel. In minutes, Isambard Brunel had a narrow escape in 1828. Over the years, floods claimed the lives of 7 men. Brunel's escape. Before I had reached the shaft, the water had risen so rapidly that I was out of my depth and therefore swam to the visitors' stairs. Isambard Kingdom, Brunel, 1827. Drowned. Not everybody escaped from the flood. Waters in time. When the tunnel was repaired, the tunnellers had the grim job of recovering the bodies of their colleagues. The Thames Informer. The Thames Tunnel was open all night and was often used by the homeless who paid a penny to enter it but did not leave until the morning. The stallholders in the tunnel worked long hours and seldom saw the sun except for on Sundays. Visitors were particularly impressed with the acoustics of the tunnel, giving their voices wonderful magnificence. Sorry about that, someone usually always calls me while I'm filming without fail every single time. I can't switch my phone off because my dad's not well at the moment, so... Mark Brunel disliked visitors to the worksite, but the directors to the company desperately needed the money they brought in. Public opening. The official opening on the 25th of March 1843 was a grand affair. Public interest was huge. Within 15 weeks the opening, over 1 million people had passed through the tunnel. The population of London at the time was only a 250,000. This vast work, now extended entirely across the river, excites the admiration of all visitors. Mogg's new picture of London and the visitor's guide to the sights in 1844. The Thames Tunnel is a tourist attraction. Despite its delays, setbacks and disasters, the Thames Tunnel was one of the sights of London from the sights of London from the day of construction started. Foreign governments sent experts to learn from its 8th wonder of the world. Seen as a triumph of British engineering, for a shilling visitors could climb down the shaft and see the shield and the workmen with foul smells, noise and the danger thrown in for free. Of course, they wouldn't allow that nowadays, would they? Royal visit. Queen Victoria came by barge in July 1843. She gave a little advance warning of her plans, and Mark Brunel missed her visit. The warehouse to the right are propped up with timber supports as the Wapping shaft had caused subsidence and cracking. The tunnel was celebrated across Europe with guidebooks and prints in many languages. Bet they had to compensate them as well, even back then. Foot tunnel. The tunnel was used by foot passengers to cross the Thames between Wapping and Rotherhithe. The fee was a penny, and the pedestrian had to deal with the long staircase and the shafts at each end. God, it would have been worth it though. Since Saturday, the tunnel has been opened to foot passengers at 1p each, and many thousands have already cheerfully paid the toll. Illustrated London News 1843. Thames Tunnel and its uses. The tunnel finally opened in 1843, a miracle of engineering, but 15 years behind schedule and heavily in debt, without money to build the giant spiral roads. To bring road traffic to the tunnel, the entrance to the tunnel was never used for its original purpose, to transport goods across the river. It has, however, found a number of other uses over its long history. All along the extent of the corridor, and in little alcoves, there are stalls of shops kept principally by women offering for sale multifarious trumpery. Nathaniel Hawthorne, 1855. Don't hear words like that anymore, do you? Multifarious trumpery, do you? Unless you're in America. Entertainment. The tunnel shafts were painted with famous scenes from around the world to amuse and to educate the pedestrians on their long climb. The tunnel was often a venue for fun fairs. with acrobats, sword swallowers, souvenir stalls and steam-powered organs and panoramic pictures of the famous events. The Underground Railway. In 1865, the owners sold the tunnel to the East London Railway Company to allow steam-powered trains to carry passengers under the river. Underground transport has revolutionised the way Londoners live today, and Transport for London still uses the Brunel Tunnel, making it the oldest section of the tunnel in the oldest underground system in the world. Now, that's the Thames Tunnel covered with. There's some souvenirs over here, and these are great. There's a list of them with their numbers. So I'm just plugging my power bank in.
We have no access to it. There is no park. Occasionally,
So 10 people, someone 50 quid, and then it's 12 quid.
yes.
Thanks very much.
And here's a watercolour by Mark Brunel himself. This signed watercolour by Mark Brunel shows the different layers of mud, gravel and clay that the engineer expected to encounter during the tunnelling under the Thames. Tradition has it that the small figure in the bow is Brunel's son Isambard. And that concludes this bit. Well, I hope you all found that barbarically interesting. He says, as he walks us down Railway Avenue, with a purpose in mind. As we leave the Brunel Museum behind. There's that shaft, look, the tunnel shaft. Now, I shall take you to a dark place I know of, where rats and mice and beetles live. You are going to join me at the end of this road, looking at something interesting relating to our tunnel. Now surely you never thought I wouldn't take you through the Thames Tunnel. What type of animalistic monster do you take me for? Now you won't see much, but it is the experience more than anything, so off we go. But before we go into the station and venture off into the tunnel, a little history on what took us from a pedestrianised tunnel of the 1820s and 40s, which should have begun its life as a tunnel taking goods wagons across the Thames, or under the Thames rather I should say. That's what its main purpose was to be, to alleviate traffic across the bridges. But that turned out to be a bit of a flunk, and pedestrianised it turned out to be, and they made a thing of that with the yearly fairs. But towards the end of its life as a pedestrianised tunnel, it turned to be a pretty dark place in the end, with muggings and prostitution and such like. But the stations, Rotherhithe station You can see this colorized image from the very late 19th to early 20th century. The station was originally opened on the 7th of December 1869, when the first section of the East London Railway was opened. On the 1st of October 1884, the Metropolitan and District Railway began running services along the East London Railway line, which called in at Rotherhithe. It was served by electric passenger trains from the 31st of March 1913, when the line was electrified. So you can imagine this tunnel, which doesn't have ventilation shafts in the middle of it, having steam trains run through, must have been pretty unpleasant. Goods trains from Liverpool Street Station continued to pass through until 1966. Here you can see this image of 1990, and look at the entrance. Look at it here in the 90s. And here you see in 2024, where they've taken out some of the windows and widened the entrance. It's got its new ticket things, or Oyster card machines inside. Modernised basically, but they've kept it with its original facade, which is nice to see. So, off we shall go into the station and down into the tunnel. We are inside the station. Escalators down, but the Thames Tunnel, it's even got its own plaque. Oops, too much. International history, the Thames Tunnel, constructed in 1825 to 43. The first shield drilled subsequent tunnel. Sir Mark Isambard Brunel. Now this is obviously a different shaft. They sank in when they built the railway line. You arrive on platform 1. And you won't see much of it, but there is the Thames Tunnel. So you will now join me on the train. Train has just come through the Thames Tunnel and we are waiting for ours, which we shall board in a minute. And look, you can see the water pissing down, hence the need for pumps and drains and pump houses and such like. Let's wait for our train. Here we are, it's our train, which we shall now be boarding. So you'll join me on the train, and I don't think we're going to see much, but you never know.
The next station is Wapping.
We're now on the train and we are heading through the tunnel to Wapping. Told you don't really get to see much. We are now travelling under the world's oldest tunnel, so join me in Wapping Station. There we are, a much better view for you. And this is Brunel's Thames Tunnel. The original entrances. This shaft is the original, and we're going to walk up this way in a minute. The station, you can see Wapping Station, another old one, 1860s Victorian, and that's the Brunel Thames Tunnel. It's the world's first underwater navigable tunnel, and this is the shaft for it. So You can hear the water pouring in, can't you? Doesn't look too bad. I like that shaft we saw on the Rotherhithe side. This is the same thing, just with modern stairs, but you can actually see the line where the old stairs went in. We are here. Join me outside the station. And there is Wapping Station. You've travelled through the world's oldest navigable under-river tunnel. Hope you all enjoyed that, and I couldn't resist the little tease of saying you don't really get to see much, because when you get to the Wapping side you do get to see the original tunnel entrances, which was great to see. But the Wapping station, pretty much the same as Rotherhithe, went up in 1869. Here is the earliest image I can find of it, from 1910. You can see the wooden built station with its tunnel shaft just behind it. And this picture from the Illustrated London News, 1869, when the first steam trains started running through the tunnels, and you can see from the Wapping side the original tunnel entrances with the original staircases still in place from the grand entrance. And this one, the Illustrated London News, the 8th of January 1870, also from Wapping Station. And here is Wapping Station in the 1930s. Nice tidy little station. And sadly this is what became of it in World War II. These are World War II images. It received hits all around it which damaged and blew apart the original station. The shaft was very badly damaged, and if you look at the bottom images you can see the damage that it caused in the grand entrance and even down in the tunnel itself. And this is the temporary building that they put up after the World War II damage in 1948. Temporary building again, 13th of February 1959. And that's what gave us the station we see today, the Wapping station that we left and the tunnel that we went through. Hope you all enjoyed. And you can see the shaft shape same as the other one. Obviously the tunnel's more modern. It was badly bombed around here during the war and then upgraded. So I hope you all found that interesting. But before we do go and end our series, I want to take you to another set of old river stairs just down there. So we'll cross over the road. Where we're going to the old, now lost, Wapping Dock stairs. First we're going to this point here, so I can show you something, and then you'll see Wapping Dock stairs on John Rock's map, and then you'll join me up there. But firstly, just pop you through. The Mayflower pub, and you can see much better from this side of the river. It's weather vane of the Mayflower ship right on top. Now I'll show you John Rock's map of the stairs from 1746, and then you'll join me on the little bit I pointed out. And as promised, Wapping Dock stairs, which you can see marked centre with the arrow, from John Rock's map of 1746. And you can see the busy Thames with the sailing ships going back and forth, bringing things in from all over the world and taking things made in England back out to all over the world. And you could have caught a boat from a Thames waterman from Wapping Dock stairs over to Church stairs in Rotherhithe, and also John Rock's map of 1746, and our stairs are marked to the extreme left with the arrow. And your boat from Wapping to Rotherhithe would have taken you to Church steps, which was smack bang next to what is now the Mayflower, but in 1746 would have been the Spread Eagle pub. And if you caught your boat and you were of a more religious disposition, you could have bypassed the pub and gone straight to St Mary's Church in Rotherhithe. And of course, a nod to the past, I couldn't resist showing this lovely watercolour. Image credit to the Brunel Museum for this one. And this shows the tunnel when it was newly opened, the Thames Tunnel, pedestrianised and brightly lit with people going back and forth. It was a real novelty, classed as one of the 8th wonders of the world. And in between the arches in the tunnel were once stalls. This prestigious location went downhill fairly rapidly and became the haunt of thieves and pickpockets and prostitutes and such like, which was just one of the reasons it was closed. Here we see Wapping Station in 2024. And the entrance to that grand tunnel, now with trains running back and forth, where pedestrians would have once gone and bought things from the stalls in between the arches. My train coming through, ready to take me over to Rotherhithe. And here is Wapping Station when it was newly opened and the tunnel changed from pedestrians into a train tunnel, and it must have been a pretty fumey affair with steam trains running back and forth through this unventilated tunnel. A very heady atmosphere it must have been. And also image credit courtesy to the Brunel Museum for this one. This shows you what the inside of the tunnel looks like nowadays, and the arches where stalls once would have been. And of course, a credit to the Brunels. This is the blue plaque on the tunnel shaft over on the Rotherhithe side to Isambard Kingdom Brunel, 1806 to 1859. Great Victorian engineer. His first project was the Thames Tunnel, and it was the world's first underwater tunnel. And here we see the father and son duo. And the main credit really has to go to Mark Brunel on the left here. A lovely painting showing him with his tunnel, because he was the architect and really the chief engineer of this one, and when his son was nearly drowned and vowed never to go back through the tunnel again, Isambard over to the right, his father completed it and finished it. Hope you all found that interesting, and join me back in the present at the old Wapping dock stairs as we finish off the video. And it's nice that they've still retained the cobbles. These stairs, as you can see by the gate I just had to pop you through, are no longer accessible. And even if they were, as I'm going to point out to you in a minute, you wouldn't be able to get down onto the shoreline anyway. They've made damn sure of that. And these old granite stairs here are the old Wapping dock stairs. And you can just see, as the tide's going out, the later addition of the framework for a set of metal stairs that was added. They've now taken the runs away from those, so you can't literally get down there even if you jump the fence. But once upon a time, before the station and long before the tunnel, you could catch a boat here from a Thames waterman and go over to church steps where the Mayflower is, or up or down river. And just from this point here, roughly here, where's my finger? There we are. Roughly from this point here is where the Mayflower itself set sail from all those years ago. And you've got Charles Hay and Sons, the old boatyard. And that now concludes our Return to Rotherhithe series. You've travelled by train under the world's first tunnel under a navigable river, and I hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for watching, everyone, and it will take me a little while to put the Walking Old Wapping series together. There'll be a few more videos in between that one, but look out for the Walking Old Wapping if that's something you'll be interested in. Be taking in some great pubs, river stairs, the Captain Kidd pub where the infamous Judge Jeffreys was captured from, and much more, including a lost church. Well, it's not lost, it's been converted into apartments, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, as I say, thanks for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed. Take care all.